Have you ever noticed something strange about human behavior? Sometimes the people who smile at you, the people who congratulate you, the people who say they support you, are secretly the ones who feel the most uncomfortable around you. You feel it in small ways: a strange silence when you succeed, a subtle criticism disguised as a joke, an invisible tension when you walk into the room, and you begin to wonder, why would someone dislike me when I have done nothing to them? But here is the uncomfortable truth most people never realize. Sometimes people don't hate you because of what you did. They hate you because of what you represent. Because your presence awakens something inside them they are trying very hard to ignore. And once you understand the psychology behind this, many confusing relationships in your life will suddenly make sense. Let's explore the 5 dark psychological reasons some people secretly hate you. Human beings carry something deep within the psyche that psychologists often describe as the hidden self. It is the silent side of our personality that lives beneath the surface of everyday behavior. The hidden self contains everything we do not want to admit about ourselves: our insecurities, our jealousy, our fear of failure, even our hidden ambitions. These parts are not always evil or negative, but they are uncomfortable. So most people push them out of awareness and pretend they do not exist. But the mind has a strange way of protecting itself. What we refuse to face within ourselves often appears outside of us, reflected in other people. And this is where the tension begins. When someone appears who naturally expresses something we secretly struggle with, it creates psychological discomfort. Not the kind of discomfort we easily recognize, but a subtle emotional disturbance that feels like irritation, annoyance, or even dislike. Imagine a person who spent their entire life wanting to be confident. Deep down, they dream of speaking their mind, taking risks, and walking into a room without fear of judgment. But instead, they grew up doubting themselves. They learned to stay quiet. They learned to shrink their voice to avoid rejection. Now one day, they meet someone who does the very thing they were always afraid to do. Someone who speaks boldly. Someone who laughs freely. Someone who expresses ideas without constantly asking for approval. Something unexpected happens. Instead of admiration, they feel irritated. Instead of inspiration, they feel uncomfortable. And the reason is rarely obvious to them, because your confidence silently reminds them of their own fear. Your freedom touches a wound they have spent years trying to ignore. The human mind dislikes this type of confrontation. It threatens the image we have built about ourselves. So instead of looking inward, the mind looks outward and searches for a way to explain the discomfort. This is where a powerful psychological mechanism begins to operate: projection. Projection happens when people take their internal conflicts and unconsciously place them onto someone else. It allows the mind to avoid self-reflection. It protects the ego from painful truths. For example, a person who secretly feels insecure may accuse others of being arrogant. A person who struggles with jealousy may claim that others are selfish or attention-seeking. Someone who fears their own ambition may criticize those who pursue success too openly. In this way, people create a story that makes their discomfort feel justified. Instead of confronting their own insecurity, they label you as arrogant. Instead of admitting their jealousy, they say you are showing off. Instead of asking themselves why your confidence bothers them, they decide that something must be wrong with you. But in reality, you simply became a mirror, and mirrors are powerful. Because mirrors do not lie. They reveal what is already there. Throughout life, we constantly encounter people who unknowingly play this role. A hardworking colleague may trigger resentment in someone who avoids responsibility. A disciplined athlete may irritate someone who struggles with laziness. A creative thinker may disturb those who are afraid to question the rules they have always followed. The strange part is that none of these reactions are really about you. They are about the silent conflict happening inside the other person. Your presence awakens something they have buried. Your behavior challenges a story They have been telling themselves for years, and when that story is threatened, the mind often reacts defensively. Sometimes the reaction is subtle, a sarcastic comment, a dismissive tone, a quiet attempt to minimize your achievements. Other times it becomes more direct, criticism, gossip, passive hostility. But beneath all these reactions lies the same psychological struggle, the struggle between the person someone is and the person they secretly wish they had the courage to become. History is full of examples of this phenomenon. Many innovators, artists, and thinkers were first met with ridicule before they were ever admired. Their ideas disturbed the comfort of the crowd. Their courage exposed the hesitation of others. And the same dynamic plays out in everyday life. A person who chooses growth will often make others uncomfortable, not because growth is wrong, but because it forces others to confront their own potential. When people refuse to explore their hidden self, they remain trapped in unconscious patterns. They criticize what they secretly desire. They resent what they secretly admire. This is why understanding the hidden self is so powerful, because it allows you to stop taking every negative reaction personally. When someone reacts strongly to your confidence, your progress, or your authenticity, it may not be an attack against you. It may simply be the reflection of something unresolved within them. And once you understand this, something inside you becomes calmer. You stop shrinking your light to protect other people's comfort. You stop apologizing for growing. You realize that sometimes the discomfort you trigger in others is not a sign that you are doing something wrong. It is simply the natural reaction of a mirror reflecting a truth someone is not yet ready to see. Success is one of the fastest ways to lose silent supporters. Not because success is something negative, not because growth is something wrong, but because growth quietly reveals a truth many people try very hard to avoid. It reveals who is moving forward and who is standing still. Human beings naturally compare themselves to the people around them. We rarely measure our lives in isolation. Instead, we look sideways. We look at friends, colleagues, classmates, neighbors. Their progress becomes a mirror through which we evaluate our own lives. And that is where the tension begins. Think about a simple example that happens in countless lives. Two friends begin their journey together. Same school, same neighborhood, same background, same dreams whispered late at night about the future. At the beginning, everything feels equal. They share the same struggles, the same jokes, the same uncertainty about life. But time has a strange way of separating paths. Years pass. One friend begins to change. Slowly at first, almost invisibly. They begin reading more. They start learning new skills. They develop discipline. They question their old habits. They begin waking up earlier. They take risks. They invest in their growth even when it feels uncomfortable. Little by little, their life begins to move in a different direction. And suddenly something shifts in the relationship. The friend who remained the same begins to feel uneasy. Not openly hostile, not immediately angry, just slightly uncomfortable. So the comments begin to appear. You've changed. You think you're better now. You're too serious about life. At first, these remarks may sound like harmless jokes. But if you listen carefully, you can feel the emotion hiding underneath them, because the truth often lies deeper than the words. Your growth forces them to face a silent and uncomfortable question. Why didn't I grow too? And this question can be psychologically painful. Psychologists who study human behavior describe something called upward comparison. It happens when people compare themselves to someone who appears to be doing better in some area of life. On the surface, upward comparison can inspire people. It can motivate them to improve. But when someone feels stuck, tired, or uncertain about their own direction, upward comparison can have the opposite effect. It threatens their self-image. Because if someone who started at the same point is now moving ahead, it forces the mind to confront a difficult possibility. Maybe the difference is not luck. Maybe the difference is effort, and that realization can be deeply uncomfortable. The human ego has a natural defense system. When our self image feels threatened, the mind searches for ways to protect itself. Instead of saying, maybe I should grow too, it sometimes says, maybe that person is the problem. So admiration quietly transforms into resentment. Instead of celebrating your discipline, they call you obsessive. Instead of respecting your ambition, they say you have changed. Instead of feeling inspired by your progress, they convince themselves that you are becoming arrogant or distant. But the real struggle is happening inside them. Your progress has become a reminder of their unused potential. And unused potential can haunt the human mind, because deep down, most people know what they are capable of becoming. They feel it in quiet moments when they imagine a better version of themselves. But acting on that potential requires courage. It requires discipline. It requires confronting fear and uncertainty. Not everyone is ready for that. So when someone nearby begins transforming their life, it creates a silent contrast. Your discipline highlights their hesitation. Your growth highlights their stagnation. Your courage highlights the risks they never took. This is why success can sometimes make relationships uncomfortable. It disrupts the balance that once existed. Before your growth, both of you shared the same level of ambition, the same limitations, the same excuses. But now something has changed. You are evolving, and evolution can disturb those who have chosen stability over transformation. History offers many examples of this pattern. Individuals who pursued new ideas, new paths, or new possibilities were often criticized first by the people closest to them. Not because those people were evil, but because change makes people confront their own choices. The same pattern happens in everyday life. A person who begins exercising seriously may face mockery from friends who prefer unhealthy habits. A student who becomes deeply focused on their studies may hear accusations that they are no longer fun. An entrepreneur who sacrifices comfort to build something meaningful may be told they are becoming obsessed. Yet beneath these criticisms lies a deeper psychological truth. Your growth is not just a personal transformation. It is a mirror that reflects the possibilities others have ignored. And sometimes that reflection is too bright for people who are not ready to see it. Understanding this changes how you interpret resistance from others. Instead of feeling guilty for growing, you begin to recognize the deeper psychology at work. Your progress is not an attack on anyone. It is simply the natural consequence of choosing evolution over comfort. And sometimes the quiet resentment you feel from others is not proof that you are moving in the wrong direction. It is proof that you are moving forward while others are still deciding whether they have the courage to begin. Some relationships are not built on respect. They are built on control. At first, this truth can be difficult to see because control in human relationships rarely appears openly. It rarely announces itself as domination. Instead, it hides beneath subtle behaviors, small emotional pressures, and invisible expectations. These relationships often feel normal at the beginning. There is conversation. There is familiarity. There may even be moments of kindness. But beneath the surface, something else is operating. A quiet psychological game. In these dynamics, one person unconsciously feels secure only when they can influence the emotional state of the other. Their sense of stability depends on maintaining control over how you feel, how you react, and sometimes even how you think about yourself. They may not even realize they are doing it. But the pattern appears again and again. They may use guilt. A simple disagreement suddenly becomes a question of loyalty. You've changed. After everything I've done for you, I guess I just care more about this than you do. They may use subtle criticism disguised as concern. I'm just being honest. I'm telling you this because I care. I'm trying to help you improve. And over time, these comments slowly shape your perception of yourself. You begin to doubt your decisions. You begin to explain yourself more than necessary. You begin to worry about upsetting them. This is how emotional manipulation works. Not through obvious force, but through psychological pressure. As long as you respond to these signals, the relationship appears peaceful. The moment you apologize, explain yourself, or adjust your behavior to restore harmony, the tension disappears. Everything feels calm again. But the calm is conditional. It exists only as long as you continue playing the role expected of you. Many people live inside these dynamics for years without fully understanding why certain relationships drain them emotionally. They feel constantly responsible for the other person's reactions. They feel the need to justify every decision. They feel anxious about small conflicts that should be normal in healthy relationships. But something remarkable happens when self-awareness begins to grow. When a person starts observing these patterns instead of automatically reacting to them, the entire structure of the relationship begins to shift. At first, the change is subtle. You stop explaining yourself excessively. You realize that not every decision requires someone else's approval. You stop defending yourself against accusations that were never fair to begin with. You begin responding calmly instead of emotionally, and perhaps most importantly, you stop reacting to emotional traps. The moment this happens, the psychological balance changes, and suddenly, the relationship feels different. The same person who once seemed comfortable with you now appears irritated. They may accuse you of being distant. They may say you have become cold, selfish, or difficult. You may hear words like, "You're not the same person anymore. You used to understand me. You don't care like you used to." But the truth behind these reactions is rarely about understanding. It is about control. Psychologists who study toxic relational patterns often observe this exact shift. When a person stops responding to manipulation, the manipulator experiences a loss of control, and control loss creates psychological discomfort. For someone who unconsciously relied on emotional influence to feel secure, this change can feel threatening. The dynamic that once gave them stability is no longer working. Their usual tools no longer produce the same reaction. The guilt no longer controls you. The criticism no longer shakes your confidence. The emotional pressure no longer forces you to adjust your behavior. And this loss of influence can turn into frustration. Sometimes it turns into hostility. But here is the important truth many people struggle to accept. You did not become the problem. You simply stopped being easy to control. This moment is often misunderstood because when people break free from unhealthy dynamics, they often feel guilty. They wonder if they are being too harsh. They question whether they have become insensitive. But real psychological maturity does not mean abandoning kindness. It means understanding the difference between kindness and submission. Healthy relationships do not require constant emotional self-defense. They do not demand endless explanations. They do not punish independence. In a healthy relationship, both individuals are free to exist as themselves without fear of emotional retaliation. But in control-based dynamics, independence disrupts the structure. The moment you stand calmly in your own decisions, the game loses its power. And the person who depended on that game suddenly feels uncomfortable. Many people interpret this reaction as rejection, but in reality, it is often the natural collapse of a dynamic that was never built on true respect. True respect does not depend on emotional control. True connection does not require manipulation. And the moment you become aware of these invisible psychological games, something inside you changes. You begin to recognize that peace purchased with constant submission is not real peace. And the freedom you gain by stepping out of those games is not cruelty. It is the beginning of emotional independence. Sometimes the people who once felt comfortable around you begin to resent that independence. Not because you harmed them, but because you quietly stepped out of a role they had grown used to controlling. And when someone refuses to play the psychological game anymore, the game itself begins to fall apart. Many people spend their lives wearing psychological masks. These masks are not always obvious. They do not look like deception on the surface. In fact, they often appear normal, even admirable. A person may appear polite, agreeable, socially appropriate, and perfectly adapted to the expectations around them. But beneath that carefully constructed surface, something deeper is often hidden: their real thoughts, their real desires, their real personality. From a very young age, people begin learning which parts of themselves are acceptable and which parts must be hidden. A child learns that certain emotions bring approval, while others bring rejection. Certain dreams are encouraged, while others are quietly discouraged. Over time, many individuals slowly shape themselves into what they believe the world wants to see. They learn to say the safe thing instead of the honest thing. They choose the secure path instead of the meaningful one. They behave the way society expects rather than the way their inner voice calls them to behave. And eventually, the mask becomes so familiar that they begin to mistake it for their real identity. Life continues like this for years, sometimes decades. But then something unusual happens. They encounter someone who is different, someone who lives authentically, a person who speaks honestly even when it is uncomfortable, someone who follows their own path instead of blindly accepting the one laid out by others, someone who refuses to pretend in order to fit into expectations that feel empty. And suddenly, the presence of this person creates a strange tension, not necessarily hostility at first, but discomfort, because authenticity has a powerful psychological effect. It disrupts the illusion. When someone lives in alignment with their inner truth, it exposes how much effort others are spending maintaining their masks. It forces a silent comparison. If this person can live honestly, why am I pretending? If this person can pursue what they truly want, why am I still following a path that feels empty? These questions rarely appear consciously, but they create a quiet psychological disturbance that people feel without fully understanding. There is a fascinating social observation about authenticity. People often admire authenticity from a distance. They celebrate bold thinkers, creative individuals, and independent spirits when they see them on screens, in books, or on stages. They call them inspiring. They praise their courage. But when authenticity appears in their immediate environment, something different happens. When the authentic person is not a distant symbol, but a coworker, a friend, or a family member, the reaction often becomes more complicated, because now authenticity is no longer just inspiration. It becomes confrontation. Imagine someone choosing an unconventional career path. Instead of following the traditional route that everyone expects, they pursue something creative, risky, or deeply personal. At first, people around them may react with curiosity, but soon the comments begin to appear. Why would you do that? That seems unrealistic. You should choose something more stable. These responses often appear logical on the surface, but beneath them lies something deeper: fear. Because courage is contagious in a strange way. When someone around us acts bravely, it reminds us that we could have acted bravely too. When someone breaks free from expectations, it exposes the invisible rules we have accepted without questioning. Your freedom highlights their hesitation. Your authenticity highlights their compromise. And this realization can create emotional tension, not always consciously, but powerfully. Think about a person who speaks openly about their beliefs, someone who expresses ideas without constantly measuring whether they will be approved or rejected. To some people, this honesty feels refreshing, but to others, it feels threatening, because it reveals how much of their own voice has been silenced over the years. Or consider someone who chooses to live according to their own values rather than social pressure. They refuse to pretend in conversations. They refuse to chase approval. They choose authenticity over popularity. Their life may not look conventional, but it carries a sense of inner alignment, and that alignment can make others uneasy. Because authenticity exposes the cost of pretending. Many people spend enormous emotional energy maintaining the image they believe others expect from them. They carefully manage their words. They adjust their opinions depending on the audience. They hide parts of themselves to avoid judgment. It is exhausting. Yet they continue because it feels safer than confronting the uncertainty of living honestly. So when someone appears who is no longer playing that game, It creates a quiet disturbance in the social environment. Your authenticity becomes a mirror that reflects the difference between living freely and living according to expectations. And mirrors are not always comfortable. Sometimes people respond with admiration, but other times they respond with criticism, not because you are wrong, but because your courage highlights the fear they have been carrying. Your freedom reminds them of the prison they built for themselves, a prison made of expectations, approval, and the silent belief that they cannot be who they truly are. And that realization can create resentment, not because authenticity is harmful, but because it exposes a truth many people have spent their lives avoiding. The truth that somewhere along the way, they traded their real self for a mask. And seeing someone live without that mask reminds them of the person they once had the chance to become. One of the deepest human fears is invisibility. Not physical invisibility, but something far more unsettling. The fear that our presence does not matter. The fear that our voice carries no weight. The fear that the world could move forward without noticing whether we are part of it or not. Human beings have always been social creatures. For thousands of years, survival depended on belonging to a group. Being valued by the tribe meant safety, protection, and identity. Being ignored or excluded meant danger. Even though modern life looks very different, the psychological imprint of that ancient reality still lives within the human mind. Deep inside, people still crave recognition. They want to feel respected. They want to feel useful. They want to feel that their existence holds meaning in the eyes of others. And when that sense of importance feels threatened, something powerful happens inside the psyche. A quiet fear begins to rise. Now imagine a common situation that unfolds in many workplaces, communities, and social circles. An individual begins to stand out. At first, the change is subtle. They begin contributing new ideas during meetings. They approach problems with creativity and initiative. They show discipline where others show hesitation. Over time, their efforts begin to produce results. Their work improves. Their ideas are noticed. Their presence becomes valuable. Leaders begin trusting their judgment. Colleagues start seeking their opinion. Their name is mentioned when achievements are discussed. From the outside, this may seem like a positive development for everyone involved. After all, when one person grows, the entire environment has the opportunity to benefit. But human psychology does not always respond with pure logic. Instead of celebrating this growth, some individuals begin reacting in a different way. At first, the signs are subtle: a sarcastic remark, a dismissive comment, a quiet attempt to downplay the achievement. Conversations start happening behind closed doors. He's just trying to impress the boss. She thinks she's smarter than everyone else. It's not really that impressive. To an outside observer, these reactions may seem unnecessary or unfair, but beneath them lies a powerful psychological mechanism. Your rising value has triggered a silent question inside their mind. If they are becoming important, what does that mean for me? Psychologists sometimes refer to this feeling as status anxiety. Status anxiety occurs when people feel that their position within a social hierarchy is being threatened. Humans are constantly, often unconsciously, evaluating their place within the structures around them. Who is respected? Who is admired? Who is listened to? When someone nearby begins gaining recognition, influence, or respect, it can disturb the invisible balance people believed existed. Before your progress, the environment may have felt predictable. Everyone occupied familiar roles. No one stood too far ahead of the others, but your growth disrupts that stability. Suddenly, the hierarchy shifts, and that shift can awaken insecurity in those who once felt comfortable in their position. This reaction is rarely conscious. Most people do not sit down and deliberately decide to resent someone's progress. Instead, the discomfort appears as emotion, a feeling of irritation, a sense of competition, a quiet resistance to acknowledging the other person's achievements, because acknowledging your progress forces them to confront something deeper, the possibility that they are falling behind. And for many individuals, that realization touches an ancient fear, the fear of becoming irrelevant. Irrelevance feels like invisibility. It feels like being replaced, forgotten, or overshadowed. In professional environments, it may feel like losing influence. In social circles, it may feel like losing importance. When that fear is activated, the mind searches for ways to restore balance. Ideally, the healthiest response would be self-improvement. To ask questions such as, how can I grow too? What can I learn from this person's discipline? How can I develop my own strengths? But growth requires humility. It requires the courage to admit that someone else may currently be ahead, and not everyone is ready for that level of self-reflection. So instead of improving themselves, some people attempt something easier. They try to reduce the value of the person who threatens their position. Criticism becomes their defense. Gossip becomes their strategy. Emotional hostility becomes their way of restoring psychological balance. If they can convince themselves that your success is meaningless, then they no longer have to confront their own stagnation. But the deeper truth remains unchanged. Your progress did not diminish their worth. Your success did not steal their potential. It simply revealed the difference between movement and stillness. Yet for someone struggling with status anxiety, that difference can feel overwhelming. This is why people who rise in any environment, whether in careers, creative fields, or social influence, often encounter resistance from unexpected places, not from strangers, but from people who once felt equal, because equality feels safe. But progress introduces contrast, and contrast makes people evaluate their own lives. Understanding this psychological dynamic can change how you interpret hostility. When people criticize your growth, it does not always mean you have done something wrong. Sometimes it simply means your evolution has disturbed a fragile sense of importance that others were quietly relying on. Your rising value has awakened their fear of being invisible. And instead of confronting that fear through growth, some people attempt to silence the discomfort by pulling you down emotionally. But the truth remains simple. Your progress is not responsible for their insecurity. It is merely the light that revealed it. If you have ever felt confused by unexplained dislike, remember this. Not every negative reaction is a reflection of your mistakes. Sometimes it is a reflection of someone else's internal conflict. Your growth may challenge them. Your confidence may expose their fear. Your authenticity may disrupt their illusion, and your independence may remove their control. Understanding this does something powerful. It frees you from unnecessary guilt. It allows you to move forward without constantly shrinking yourself to keep others comfortable. Because the truth is, you cannot evolve in life without unintentionally disturbing people who have chosen not to. And sometimes, the quiet hatred you feel from others is not proof that you are doing something wrong. It is proof that you are becoming something they are afraid to face.